Could I
Right.
ask a question? Hi, Roy Seitzinger from Westerly. Some of my members wanted to know, can they be involved in the interview process and the selection of the candidate or not? Because the question comes up, aren't they the final adjudicating body, so to speak, and doesn't that sort of mess with their capacity to do that if they're inside the interviewing process?
My opinion is that school committee members should not be on the interview committee. And the reason you should not be is because you're going to sit as the board to approve or disapprove. I would not be in favor of putting school committee members on initial boards to appoint. You as a school committee have the right to appoint a superintendent, and that's your job alone. You have a right as a school committee to appoint legal counsel. But in terms of the initial interview process and the choosing of the applicant that's going to go in front of the committee, I'm uncomfortable doing that. Now, I do know there are some committees that do that. If I represent you, I'm going to tell you that I don't agree that you should be doing it. Ben?
So it's not illegal, right? It's not illegal. But you, especially new school committee members, have to understand you are a different person than you were the day before the election. So people look at you in a different way in the process because, as Mary Ann says, you get to make the final decision, right? So if you now walk into a room with a bunch of teachers and administrators and maybe the assistant superintendent for some type of interview, who do you think they're all going to be looking at for cues or hints or tips? And how then does the superintendent make an independent decision, which is his or her responsibility under the law in terms of making appointments, if you've got in the middle of that and you've skewed that process? That's a problem. So I think Mary Ann and I agree on that point. The only time that you would sit on an interview committee and be intimately involved is the hiring of a superintendent.
Or the legal counsel is definitely your position. If you are going to hire Ben or myself, that's a school committee action. Because as legal counsel, the school committee has a right to appoint legal counsel, and we represent the committee. Now, even though we're very close to the superintendents in the districts that we represent, we really serve at the pleasure of the school committee, and we represent the school committee. Even though some of our superintendents call us at 6:30 in the morning.
So if you talk to members of your committee that have been on the committee for a while, and you talk to members of other school committees through this association, which we encourage you to do to get different perspectives, I think you'll find that they will all tell you that you need to now distance yourself from things that you've been more intimately involved in the past. So you're really excited. It's a brand new job. You want to bring all the people's voices to that job. But since you're the final decider now on a lot of decisions, you've got to consider very carefully, should I still be an active member of a PTA? Should I be on a SIT team? Should I be involved in any voluntary committees that I was at before? If ultimately my opinion now is going to skew the results of that, and I was just talking to a school committee person before we got up here, if now an appointment comes up through the superintendent and you're in an interview committee and you made it clear that you like that person, how does that look in that whole process? You've now tainted that whole hiring process. Doesn't look fair at all. So even if it's legal to do, your involvement at the wrong time could make both you look bad and your school committee to look bad. So these are things you really have to approach thoughtfully now. Yes? Next.
You got a question? Yes.
I'll be loud because Mike's gone, but so either for Ben or Mary Ann, whoever wants to answer this, maybe Goonies Providence School Committee. If we run into a situation where we as school committee members feel that we have other members, thank you. If we feel that, you know, we're going down the rabbit hole, right? And we have members inserting themselves into the process where they should not be, and we're concerned about the integrity of the process and for the well-being of the school department, do we have any standing? Do we have any recourse, et cetera?
It's a difficult question.
We don't have an answer for that. We come across this all the time. We have people on committees sometimes that do things that they shouldn't be doing. But quite frankly, each of you here has been elected by the people in your district. They're the ones that decide whether you sit there or whether you don't sit there. I've had committees that have tried to sanction a school committee person, but it's a joke. It has no weight. So, you know, you can make it public and you can, you know, go to the press, but at the end of the day, that person's still going to sit on the committee. They're still going to do what they want, and there is nothing that any one of you can do about it.
I wouldn't go as far as Mary Ann. She's probably saying that because she sits on a school committee and wants to do whatever she wants. So
I do.
She does. So that wasn't a joke. Well, first of all, public censure, which a school committee could do, has weight, because the school committee could publicly vote that this person has acted in an inappropriate way, and you've passed judgment on them, then the voters could pick that up or not. One of the reasons why I suggested earlier, if you look at the rules of management, ethical rules of management, if you pass those and incorporate those in policy, one of them says that administratively you have a duty to deal with the superintendent and not any other personnel positions in the district. And that tends by policy to hem people in and do the right thing. So one of the things you want to look at are your bylaws and your policies to see whether or not you can force people to live within those guardrails. If they're clearly outside, Mary Ann's right. Ultimately, the voters have to decide what kind of person they want in that seat. But it does inform the voters. If the committee has decided to operate in a certain manner because the General Assembly has set that out, and now they're acting as a lone wolf. I think ultimately people pass bad judgment on that.
And at the end of the day, if somebody's doing something badly and they've just been elected, if they're on a 2-year term, it's going to be 2 years before the voters are going to make a decision not to have that person anymore. So, you know, we hope everybody acts in a professional manner, but you really don't have any control during the course of the term over somebody who may be acting inappropriately.
You know, one of the things that we've observed, that was really a good question because it leads to down a lot of other paths. We've observed that there are a lot of people that get on a committee and they think that they can control the committee immediately. They're an individual. They don't realize that they're elected to a committee, not to a position of town administrator or mayor, right? So they don't understand from the very beginning their obligation, if you have 5 people, is to get a majority of those 5 people to go along with your idea. You, as a school committee individual, have no authority. You just hold a seat. Any authority that you have is created by a majority school committee action, and that's it. And that's very important. So you probably could limit a school committee person from doing certain things if you had to, based on that notion. But it is difficult and it's very messy. The worst thing you want to do is have a fight among yourselves in public.
And Ben, just to add to something that Ben said, keep in mind, individually, you have no power. The power comes from the majority of the school committee. So you've always got to figure out where your majority is, and then based on a vote of the majority, that's what gives you power. I try to say to individual school committee members that call me, excuse me, you can't do anything unless you have the majority. So, you know, if they want to go off on a tangent and they want to go into the schools and they want to start telling everybody what to do, they have no power individually.
So a companion concept to this is due process. So attorneys talk about due process all the time, and so do judges. This is a really high-level review of it, but due process means when you act in a certain way, you go through a process. Are you doing it in a way that's fair? Now, why do we care about that, except it's a wonderful ideal to do everything fair and treat people fairly? Well, the school committee, as we mentioned, is an instrumentality of the state. You're created by the General Assembly, and you're also acknowledged by all your town charters. Any government entity is bound by principles of due process because they're embedded both in the Rhode Island Constitution and the United States Constitution. So when people deal with you, they have certain constitutional and civil rights. And to the extent that you violate those rights, the school committee could be found liable, the district could be found liable, or you could be found individually liable if you conspire with, say, another school committee person to deprive someone of their rights, like their right to a job, or their right to a fair hearing, or some kind of other fair process and discipline. So what does this mean? This means as a school committee person, you have this obligation to stay away from administrative, employment, educational decisions until they come before you. So if a parent calls you up and says, my son John, you remember he's the captain of the football team, well, he just got caught with a joint and he's now been suspended for the balance of the year, and John can't play in the championship football game. You need to do something about this. You can't do anything about that, because in terms of process, that disciplinary decision, after it goes through the superintendent, gets appealed to you. If you participate in that at any point before it comes to you, you've now tainted that whole process. That'll be used as a defense, because you know what school committees are like. They're like sieves. There are no secrets on school committees. Community's going to know. It's going to result in a lawsuit in federal district court. You're going to be named as a member of the suit, that you participated in an appropriate fashion, and a judge is going to issue attorney's fees and sanctions, and your name's going to be right out there, and you may end up paying some of those.